Things just got heated in the world of trade and politics. U.S. President Donald Trump has once again stirred up controversy, this time by announcing a major expansion of tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. He's not just bringing back old trade restrictions, he's cranking them up. Steel imports will now face a hefty 25% tariff, with aluminum also getting slapped with additional taxes. But that's not all. Trump also hinted at a reciprocal tariff system, meaning that if another country charges high taxes on American goods, the U.S. will hit them with equally tough tariffs in return. As expected, this move has sent shockwaves across the globe, especially among America's closest trade partners. The European Union and Canada, two of the biggest buyers of U.S. goods, bringing in over $550 billion worth of products every year, are not happy. If they decide to fight back with their own trade measures, it could send ripples through the American economy, affecting industries and businesses nationwide. However, just as tensions over tariffs rose, Trump took things to an entirely new level, one that no one had seen coming. In an eyebrow-raising interview with Fox News, he floated an idea that left Canadians in disbelief. He suggested that Canada become the 51st state of the United States. "I think Canada would be much better off as part of the U.S., because we lose $200 billion a year with them, and I'm not going to let that happen," Trump said. He didn't stop there. He also took aim at Canada's military spending, claiming that the country relies too much on U.S. protection without contributing its fair share. "Why are we protecting another country?" he questioned. Then, during a pre-Super Bowl interview, he doubled down, once again suggesting that Canada can't stand on its own without U.S. economic support and military backing. His solution? Absorption into the U.S. as the newest state. Naturally, this didn't sit well with Canada's leaders or its people. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau quickly fired back, calling the proposal an insult to the deep historical ties between the two countries. Across Canada, politicians from different parties stood united in opposition. Many saw Trump's remarks not just as a political stunt, but as a direct challenge to Canada's independence. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh took an even more aggressive stance. Furious over Trump's new tariffs, he proposed a bold countermeasure, a 100% tariff on Tesla vehicles. Why Tesla? Because Elon Musk, one of Trump's most vocal allies, has been supportive of the former president's economic policies. "If Trump and his billionaire buddies think they can push Canada around, we need to push back," Singh declared. Meanwhile, Stéphane Dion, Canada's ambassador to France, dismissed Trump's remarks with a pointed response. "If Canada isn't a viable country, then show me a viable country." Dion made it clear that such rhetoric goes against international norms and even violates principles outlined in the United Nations Charter. He emphasized that Canada is more than capable of standing on its own, and will not be intimidated by political theatrics. Just this past Sunday night, Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne didn't mince words about how crucial Canadian steel and aluminum are to the U.S. economy. These materials, he explained, aren't just commodities. They're the backbone of key American industries like defense, shipbuilding, and auto manufacturing. "Canadian steel and aluminum keep U.S. industries running," Champagne stated. "We're going to keep standing up for our workers and businesses." Meanwhile, Catherine Cobden, head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, sounded the alarm on what Trump's proposed 25% tariffs could mean. "These tariffs would be a disaster, plain and simple," she warned, stressing that they would hurt both American and Canadian industries if the U.S. refuses to grant an exemption. She's calling for immediate retaliation. "Targeting Canadian steel and aluminum is unfair and unjustified," Cobden declared. "We can't just sit back, we need to hit back." Meanwhile, Catherine Cobden, head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, sounded the alarm on what Trump's proposed 25% tariffs could mean. "These tariffs would be a disaster, plain and simple," she warned, stressing that they would hurt both American and Canadian industries if the U.S. refuses to grant an exemption. She's calling for immediate retaliation. "Targeting Canadian steel and aluminum is unfair and unjustified," Cobden declared. "We can't just sit back, we need to hit back." But this trade standoff isn't just about taxes on raw materials. It's spilling over into national security debates, political maneuvering, and even Arctic defense strategies. Pierre Poilievre, leader of Canada's Conservative Party, is doubling down on a tough stance, not just against tariffs, but on reinforcing Canada's northern defenses. His plan, build a new Arctic military base, double the number of Inuit Rangers from 2,000 to 4,000, and acquire 2 additional polar icebreakers to strengthen Canada's presence in the region. Funding for all this, he argues, should come from slashing foreign aid. Canada spent around $16 billion on aid in 2022 to 2023, and Poilievre says it's time to bring that money home. He's particularly targeting what he calls wasteful and corrupt grants, arguing that national defense should come first, especially with growing concerns about Russian activity in the Arctic. Poilievre also had sharp words for Trump's trade policies. If he were prime minister, he said, Canada wouldn't just complain, it would fight fire with fire. I'd slap the same tariffs on American steel and aluminum, he declared, and every dollar from those tariffs would go straight back into Canada's steel and aluminum industries. He even suggested that any extra revenue from the tariffs could be used to cut taxes for Canadian businesses and consumers. Ontario Premier Doug Ford also didn't hold back. He called the tariffs unjustified, unfair, and frankly illegal. We don't want to do this, Ford said, but if they push us, we'll push back. He added that he'd rather build a strong North American trade alliance, an Amcan fortress, focusing on critical resources like minerals and oil rather than fighting over tariffs. While Canada gears up for battle, Europe isn't sitting quietly either. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has already warned that if the US goes through with these tariffs, the EU will respond aggressively. The European Union will not accept unfair treatment, the Commission said in a statement. We are fully prepared to protect our businesses, workers, and consumers. French President Emmanuel Macron also didn't hold back. In a CNN interview, when asked about Trump's latest move, he made it clear he's ready to fight. I've done it before and I'll do it again, Macron said. He pointed out that these tariffs wouldn't just hurt Europe. They'd drive up costs in the United States, making life more expensive for American consumers. Do Americans really want higher prices? He asked, suggesting that these policies could backfire on the very people Trump claims to protect. But Macron didn't stop there. He also questioned why the United States was picking a fight with Europe in the first place. Is the European Union your biggest problem? No, I don't think so, he said. Your first problem is China, so maybe focus on that. Meanwhile, French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian sent a strong message of his own. Speaking on French television, he reminded viewers that this wasn't Trump's first attempt at targeting European trade. We've been here before, he said, and just like in 2018, we'll respond. Germany is also ready to strike back fast. Chancellor Olaf Scholz made it clear that the European Union is fully prepared to implement countermeasures quickly. We can act within an hour if necessary, he warned, signaling that Europe won't hesitate to retaliate. Germany is also ready to strike back fast. Chancellor Olaf Scholz made it clear that the EU is fully prepared to implement countermeasures quickly. We can act within an hour if necessary, he warned, signaling that Europe won't hesitate to retaliate. Trade battles between the United States and the European Union aren't just about steel and aluminum, they've always been a game of strategic hits and counter-hits. If Washington decides to push forward with new tariffs, the EU isn't short on ways to fight back. In the past, Europe has gone straight for products that hit America where it hurts. Instead of only targeting metals, the EU has aimed at goods with deep political significance like bourbon whiskey, Florida orange juice, and motorcycles. Why? Because these aren't just products, they're tied to key U.S. industries and regions with strong political influence. The message is clear. If you tax us, we'll make sure your economy feels it too. Now, with even more tools at its disposal, the EU's counterpunch could be stronger than ever. A major game changer is the bloc's new anti-coercion instrument, which gives Brussels a whole new set of weapons beyond just import tariffs. One of the most powerful options? Shutting U.S. companies out of Europe's massive public contracts market. That means American firms could suddenly find themselves locked out of bidding for billion-dollar infrastructure and services projects across the EU, and it doesn't stop there. Regulators in Brussels could also clamp down on American service providers, everything from banking and insurance to tech and streaming platforms. Imagine major U.S. companies like Apple, Google, or Netflix suddenly facing new legal roadblocks just to operate in the EU. There's already a legal framework in place to make this happen. Under laws like the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, European regulators could tighten the screws on tech giants by hitting them with stricter compliance rules, harsher penalties, or even outright restrictions. Companies like Meta, Alphabet, and Amazon, which dominate online markets, could suddenly find themselves facing major hurdles in one of their most lucrative regions. If that's not enough, there's also the possibility of reviving a long-dormant weapon, the digital services tax. Originally put on hold in favor of a global tax agreement through the OECD, an EU-wide tax on American tech companies could be back on the table. And if Brussels doesn't impose it across the board, individual member states like France could still move forward with their own national versions, putting U.S. businesses under even more financial strain. But the EU doesn't have to limit itself to the tech world. If things escalate further, Brussels could make life harder for American pharmaceutical companies, agricultural exporters, or even the chemical industry by introducing new regulatory hurdles or limiting access to European markets. While the EU typically favors diplomacy over confrontation, these measures would make it impossible for Washington to ignore the economic and political fallout of its tariff policies. Beyond direct retaliation, Europe is also strengthening its global trade partnerships to reduce reliance on the U.S. In 2021, Canada and the EU launched a strategic partnership focused on securing critical raw materials, an initiative that has only grown stronger with recent high-level talks in 2024. The goal is to build diversified, resilient supply chains that don't depend on geopolitical rivals or unpredictable trade policies from Washington. In 2021, Canada and the EU launched a strategic partnership focused on securing critical raw materials, an initiative that has only grown stronger with recent high-level talks in 2024. The goal is to build diversified, resilient supply chains that don't depend on geopolitical rivals or unpredictable trade policies from Washington. Considering that trade between the U.S. and the EU exceeds $1 trillion annually, any aggressive move from Brussels would have global consequences, forcing Washington to rethink its approach. With so many options at its disposal, the EU is making one thing clear: any tariff war won't be one-sided. Donald Trump is shaking up global trade once again, reviving his push for aggressive tariffs on steel and aluminum. This time he's slapping a hefty 25% duty on steel and an additional yet-to-be-disclosed tariff on aluminum. And unlike past trade fights, he's making it clear that no one is off limits, not even America's closest allies in Europe and North America. But that's not all. Trump is also pushing for a reciprocal tariff system, where the United States would match the import taxes that other countries impose on American goods. He's particularly fixated on the European Union's 10% tariff on imported cars, arguing that it's unfair compared to the U.S. tariff of just 2.5%. However, critics are quick to point out a key detail Trump often leaves out. The United States already charges a whopping 25% tariff on imported pickup trucks, one of the most profitable segments of the auto industry. For countries that rely on selling steel and aluminum to the U.S., this latest move could be a major blow. Canada, which supplies nearly 80% of America's aluminum imports, is at the top of the list. But other nations, including Brazil, Mexico, South Korea, and Vietnam, also have a lot at stake. With Trump leaving the fate of existing duty exemptions and quota agreements up in the air, exporters are scrambling for clarity, while American manufacturers that depend on imported metals brace for higher costs. If all of this sounds familiar, it's because we've been here before. Back in 2018, Trump ignited a global trade war by imposing similar tariffs, 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum. At first, the duties applied to everyone, but after intense backlash, some countries, including Canada, Mexico, and Brazil, secured exemptions or quota agreements. For a brief moment, these measures helped U.S. steel mills boost production. In 2019, American steel plants were running at over 80% capacity, a level they hadn't seen in years. But the momentum didn't last. Prices soon dropped, largely due to China's dominance in global steel production, wiping out many of the gains that U.S. producers had enjoyed. When Joe Biden took office, he took a different approach. Strengthening Canada-EU ties has become a focal point in recent years. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, has played a significant role in this. By reducing tariffs and facilitating smoother trade, both Canada and the EU have seen increased economic collaboration. This partnership not only boosts trade, but also fortifies political and social bonds between the regions. Instead of escalating the trade war, His administration worked to ease tensions, negotiating agreements that lifted tariffs in exchange for import quotas with key allies like the United Kingdom, the European Union and Japan. This helped cool off retaliatory measures, even leading the EU to suspend planned duties on American products like bourbon whiskey. But with Trump's latest push for tariffs, all of that progress is now at risk as Washington reignites its trade battles. Canada and the European Union are taking steps to protect themselves. Their solution? Strengthening their trade relationship to reduce reliance on the unpredictable U.S. market. At the heart of this effort is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, a deal that has been reshaping trade between Canada and the EU since its provisional launch in 2017. With the U.S. repeatedly threatening Canadian exports, Ottawa sees this as a critical moment to expand trade with Europe, giving businesses more options beyond their traditional reliance on the American market. Canadian Trade Minister Mary Ang recently traveled to Brussels to push for even deeper collaboration. Her message was clear: Canada is looking beyond the U.S. and wants to make it easier for its businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, to tap into European markets. However, there's still a long way to go. In 2020, only 57% of Canadian exporters eligible for CETA benefits were actually using them. Many businesses, particularly smaller ones, struggle to navigate the complexities of international trade agreements. To change that, Ottawa is ramping up efforts to educate and support SMEs, offering financial aid and advisory programs to help them break into European markets. One such initiative, the Can Export SMEs program, provides grants of up to $75,000 to help small businesses develop and execute export strategies. With over 98% of Canadian businesses classified as SMEs, the government knows that helping them take full advantage of CETA could be the key to making Canada less vulnerable to U.S. trade disputes. When the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted global trade, Canada had to rethink how it helps businesses expand internationally. Traditional trade missions became impossible, so the government pivoted. Instead of in-person meetings and overseas networking events, they began supporting virtual trade shows, digital marketing campaigns, and even helping businesses cover the cost of adapting to new international regulations. The goal was simple: make it easier for Canadian companies, especially smaller ones, to find new markets beyond the U.S. The European Union, with its massive consumer base and demand for high-quality goods, became a key focus. But trade isn't just about selling products, it's also about securing the materials needed to build the industries of the future. That's where critical minerals come in. Electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines, none of these technologies can function without minerals like nickel, aluminum, and uranium. Canada happens to be one of the world's top suppliers of these essential materials, and the EU wants a stable, responsible partner to help fuel its ambitious clean energy goals. Recognizing their shared interests, Canada and the EU formed a strategic partnership on raw materials in 2021. Their latest discussions in early 2024 reinforced the urgency of this collaboration, with both sides working to reduce dependence on suppliers from politically unstable regions. Recognizing their shared interests, Canada and the EU formed a strategic partnership on raw materials in 2021. Their latest discussions in early 2024 reinforced the urgency of this collaboration, with both sides working to reduce dependence on suppliers from politically unstable regions. Canada has already committed nearly 4 billion CAD to its critical minerals strategy, ensuring that mining practices are sustainable and that Indigenous communities benefit from resource development. For the EU, this partnership is a chance to diversify supply chains and reduce risk associated with relying too heavily on any one country. Beyond trade and minerals, another key focus of Canada-EU collaboration is opening up job opportunities. Right now, Canadian professionals like architects, engineers, and accountants often face hurdles when trying to work in Europe and vice versa. Under CETA, both sides are taking steps to make professional qualifications more easily recognized. They're starting with architects, creating a framework that will eventually expand to other professions, making it simpler for skilled workers to find opportunities on either side of the Atlantic. This might sound like a small step, but it has huge implications. Making it easier for talent to flow between Canada and Europe means more innovation, more collaboration, and a stronger, more competitive economy in both regions. Tensions with the United States are giving Canada even more reason to strengthen its ties with the EU. Trump's latest trade threats, including a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, have only heightened concerns about economic reliance on the U.S. But what really caught attention was Trump's off-the-cuff remark about Canada becoming America's 51st state. Canadian leaders immediately pushed back, calling the suggestion absurd and reaffirming their commitment to sovereignty. In response to U.S. tariffs, Canada briefly imposed its own retaliatory duties on American imports before agreeing to a 30-day negotiation window. While talks are ongoing, the situation has made one thing clear. Canada can't afford to be caught off guard by shifting U.S. policies. That's why expanding trade with Europe isn't just about economics, it's about long-term security and independence. For Canada, a stronger EU partnership means less reliance on unpredictable U.S. policies and more opportunities in areas like clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and digital services. For the EU, securing a steady supply of Canadian minerals reduces dependence on high-risk suppliers, while also opening doors for European businesses looking to expand into North America. This evolving partnership is more than just a trade deal, it's a strategic shift that reflects a changing global economy, where countries are rethinking alliances and looking for stability in uncertain times. Recent research confirms that such aggressive tariff measures can have far-reaching implications beyond immediate industry impacts. A 2024 report from the Peterson Institute for International Economics highlights that while tariffs may offer short-term protection for domestic industries, they also risk long-term disruptions in global supply chains and increased production costs for consumers. Recent research confirms that such aggressive tariff measures can have far-reaching implications beyond immediate industry impacts. A 2024 report from the Peterson Institute for International Economics highlights that while tariffs may offer short-term protection for domestic industries, they also risk long-term disruptions in global supply chains and increased production costs for consumers. Data from the World Bank indicates that nations involved in these trade disputes are already redirecting investments, over $50 billion collectively in the past year alone, into diversifying supply chains and digital trade infrastructure to mitigate these risks. Furthermore, a study published by the OECD in early 2025 warns that sustained tariff battles could lead to economic decoupling, forcing companies in key sectors such as automotive, technology, and agriculture to reconfigure their global operations. These research-based insights emphasize the delicate balance policymakers must strike between protecting domestic interests and maintaining the stability of interconnected global markets, underscoring the critical need for coordinated international efforts to foster fair and sustainable trade practices. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up.